Today is Monday, March 3rd. We're talking about a rare moment of public hostility in the Oval Office, with President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky butting heads in front of TV cameras, what the White House now has to say about it, and what happens next. Also, what's changing now that English is becoming America's official language, and where dozens of wildfires forced evacuations over the weekend. Plus, we'll bring you the biggest moments from last night's Oscars, ways to save now that spring break has become pricier than ever. And from prisoner to champion, we have a sports redemption story for the ages. Those stories and even more news to know next. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. The U.S. and Ukraine seem to be on shaky ground in the wake of a public spat that played out for millions of people all over the world. Things started on a mostly hopeful note since Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was visiting the White House to sign a minerals deal. But things got heated as Zelensky and President Trump answered questions from the Oval Office. It seemed like the biggest stumbling block between the two leaders was Trump's belief that diplomacy is the path to peace, since Zelensky insists Russia cannot be trusted to honor the terms of any kind of peace deal that would come from talks. And when Zelensky challenged the idea of a ceasefire without security guarantees, the leaders exploded into a shouting match. Trump even accused Zelensky of gambling with World War III by fighting Russia's invasion instead of being open to negotiations. But later, the White House spokesperson said there actually wasn't anything specific Zelensky said that President Trump objected to, that it was his tone and body language Trump found disrespectful. She said American officials were also annoyed Zelensky did not dress appropriately for the meeting. Though it's worth noting Zelensky has often worn standard-issue field uniforms since the start of the war, saying it's a show of solidarity with his soldiers. At another especially tense point in the Oval Office meeting, Vice President J.D. Vance demanded Zelensky thank Trump for all the help the U.S. has given Ukraine, something Zelensky insisted he's done many times. Though after about 50 minutes, Trump said, "I think we've seen enough." Then White House officials say they asked Zelensky to leave. The minerals deal was never signed, and a joint press conference was canceled. So now what? Well, Zelensky says Ukraine is still ready to sign a minerals deal with the U.S. and that he still considers the U.S. a strategic partner. And on social media, he posted about being thankful to America. Still, last we've heard members of the Trump administration are calling for new leadership in Ukraine, with Trump himself saying he doesn't believe Zelensky ever wants the war to end. Reports say Trump is meeting today with his top national security aides to consider what to do. And the New York Times cites sources who say they're thinking about suspending or even canceling American aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, European leaders held an emergency summit yesterday to rally more support for Ukraine. There, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it will be up to Europe to do the heavy lifting to work with Zelensky and come up with a plan to end the war. The UK also gave Ukraine a multi-billion-dollar loan over the weekend and urged other European countries to follow suit. Stay tuned. The first phase of the ceasefire deal expired in Gaza over the weekend, and now Israel has blocked all humanitarian aid heading into the Strip until Hamas agrees on phase 2. The idea for the second phase came from Trump's Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff, who suggested extending the ceasefire through the Ramadan and Passover holiday periods. Under the Witkoff proposal, Hamas would release half of all hostages on the first day, and the rest when an agreement is reached on a permanent ceasefire. But Hamas rejected it, with its leaders saying they don't want to extend phase 1, they just want a phase 2 where Israeli troops fully withdraw from Gaza. Well, with that, food, medicine, and all other supplies headed into Gaza were cut off. Mediators in Egypt and Qatar accused Israel of violating humanitarian law by using starvation as a weapon. But the U.S. said it supported Israel's move. In fact, ABC News cites sources who say Israel's decision was coordinated with the Trump administration. Negotiations are still ongoing. Thousands more American troops are headed to the U.S.-Mexico border. Service members from one of the Army's most seasoned combat units are getting ready to deploy within the next few days, bringing the total number of active duty troops on the border to nearly 10,000. And thousands more have been put on standby. So far, active duty troops have been helping build barriers and support law enforcement agencies. But Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says, quote, "Whatever is needed at the border will be provided." For now, the southern border is relatively calm. There has been a sharp drop in the number of people crossing the U.S.-Mexico border in recent months, especially since President Trump took office. For the first time in history, the U.S. has a national language. President Trump signed an executive order designating English as the official language of the U.S. And with that, Trump did away with a Clinton-era policy that required the government offer assistance programs, such as offering translators, for people who are not fully fluent. It comes at a time when other languages are becoming more common around the country, though. Roughly 1 in 10 people in the U.S. speak a language other than English, more than triple the number 40 years ago. So why make the change now? The White House says the order is meant to unify Americans under a shared culture and bring more consistency into the government, while some advocacy organizations say the order will hurt diverse communities. It's also caused some backlash in Puerto Rico, since the U.S. territory is mostly Spanish-speaking. Though to be clear, federal agencies are allowed to offer services and documents in other languages, it just won't be mandatory. Nearly 200 wildfires broke out across the Carolinas over the weekend, and some neighborhoods rushed to evacuate, with videos on social media showing people running from large clouds of smoke and flames. As of this morning, though, there aren't any reports of widespread damage or injuries. Dry and breezy conditions helped fires burn out of control, but the weather has gotten somewhat calmer, and most red flag warnings have expired, at least in the Carolinas. Some areas in the Southwest are bracing for their own fire weather, though, including parts of New Mexico and Texas. The South could also be in for a severe weather outbreak this week, starting tomorrow across parts of Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi, and then Wednesday in Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia. Stay tuned. All right, we have more news for you still ahead. But first, this episode of The Newsworthy is brought to you by Wildgrain. Wildgrain is the first bake-from-frozen subscription box for artisanal breads, pastries, and pastas. Wildgrain's boxes are fully customizable to your taste and dietary restrictions, so they even have a gluten-free box and a plant-based box. But best of all, they take the hassle out of baking, since all the items bake from frozen in just 25 minutes or less with no mess or cleanup. For example, I threw a loaf of sourdough bread from Wildgrain in the oven the other night while I made some broccoli cheddar soup, and the bread was ready so quickly and so easily, and it made the meal 10 times better. It was high quality, fresh, delicious bread, and it was an absolute hit with my family. So are you ready to bring all your favorite carbs right to your doorstep? Be sure to check out Wildgrain so you can begin building your own box of artisanal breads, pastas, and pastries. And for a limited time, Wildgrain is offering our listeners $30 off the first box, plus free croissants in every box. I love these croissants. When you go to wildgrain.com/newsworthy to start your subscription. You heard me, free croissants in every box and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/newsworthy. That's wildgrain.com/newsworthy, or you can use the promo code newsworthy at checkout. Now, back to the news. That's a wrap on Hollywood's biggest night. The 97th Academy Awards ended without any major gaffes, but plenty of moments to talk about. Starting with the first 5 minutes, all about Oz. Wicked stars Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo performed a medley from The Wizard of Oz, The Wiz, and of course, their own Oscar-nominated movie, Wicked. Then came host Conan O'Brien, who joked about the movies, the nominees, and himself, then launched into a musical number of his own. As for the actual awards, Anora was the biggest winner. The small indie movie won 5 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Anora's star, Mikey Madison, won for Best Actress. Best Actor went to Adrian Brody for The Brutalist. He also would have won for the night's longest acceptance speech if that were a real thing. The other top acting awards went to Kieran Culkin and Zoe Saldana for their supporting roles in A Real Pain and Amelia Perez. If you want to watch the Oscar-winning movies for yourself, most of them are available on streaming. Thousands of protesters marched through at least 150 of America's national parks over the weekend, from the Grand Canyon to the Rocky Mountains to Yosemite, Yellowstone, and beyond. All of the protests were against the Trump administration since it has cut off support for historic public lands. In recent weeks, thousands of people have lost their jobs at the National Park Service and U.S. Forest Service, and even more cuts are expected as part of a push to cut federal spending. In response to some of the backlash, the Trump administration said it would hire thousands more seasonal workers than in years past. Also, over the weekend, demonstrators gathered at dozens of Tesla showrooms around the country and overseas. Those protests were specifically against Tesla CEO Elon Musk, who has a key role in the government downsizing right now. Critics have launched the so-called Tesla takedown movement, telling supporters to sell their Tesla stocks and cars in an effort to hit Musk where it hurts. For now, though, the White House says no protest will deter Musk from making the government more efficient and accountable to American taxpayers. Skype is hanging up for good, set to shut down this May. But it will forever be known as the service that made it popular to make calls over the internet. Microsoft announced it was discontinuing Skype just 14 years after buying it for $8.5 billion. At the time, it was the biggest acquisition in the tech giant's history, and it made sense since back then millions of people were on Skype, and it was so widely known that it became a verb to Skype someone. But now there's a lot more competition from WhatsApp, Zoom, Google Meet, and Microsoft's other platform for video calls, Teams. So Microsoft says it's just consolidating. And if you're on Skype now, you will soon be able to use your same credentials to log on and find your same contacts and chat histories on Teams. A pro golfer has paved the path from a biker gang to the British Open. Ryan Peake earned his spot when he won the New Zealand Open yesterday. It was his first professional win, and he called it life-changing. Just a few years ago, Peake was a member of the outlawed Rebels gang in Australia. He was convicted of assault and sentenced to 5 years in prison. After getting out, he went right into building his golf career. Now he's headed to the championship this summer. And that means Peake will be going up against some of the greats like Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, Phil Mickelson, and last year's winner, Xander Schauffele. So stay tuned. Well, that's it for the main news, so now it's time for Money Monday, when we talk about one interesting money-related news story. But first, thanks to our sponsor, Quince. I am over the days of buying something super cheap to wear just once or twice, and then it either falls apart or it's just not trendy anymore. Now, I prefer quality, even a little luxury, though I still need it to be affordable. And that's where Quince comes in. Quince offers a range of high-quality items at prices within reach, like 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from just $50, washable silk tops and dresses, organic cotton sweaters, and 14-karat gold jewelry. The best part? All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings onto us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. So I love that. My most recent get was a wool quarter zip pullover. I adore how soft and warm this sweater is, and I so appreciate that I can throw it on for a quick casual look or dress it up to be a bit more sophisticated. Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/newsworthy for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/newsworthy to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/newsworthy. Now back to Money Monday. It's never been more expensive to take a spring break vacation. This year, the peak period is March 12th through the 21st. And during that time, the average trip costs $8,300. That's 26% more than what a spring break vacation cost just last year. The numbers come from a travel insurance comparison engine called SquareMouth, which surveyed 8,000 travelers about their plans. And it found nearly half of them are planning a bucket list trip. So destinations like Japan and Italy have become more popular. And even though the exchange rates are pretty good right now, it's still a lot more expensive to go overseas than to a usual spring break favorite like Mexico. Still, no matter where you're going, the costs of both flights and hotels are, on average, higher than last year. So more people are looking for ways to save money. If that's you, Expedia recommends flying in the middle of the week instead of a weekend. And instead of going to pricey places like Japan or Italy, Kayak suggests choosing somewhere like Puerto Rico or other islands in the Caribbean that are recovering from hurricanes. Or you can opt for a cold weather destination, which isn't typically as popular this time of year, but can still be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back with even more news to know tomorrow. For now, have a great day.